Welcome back to the Manage to Win podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly.com. You can learn how to take your strengths to the next level. Why not? Make it a superpower. Okay, maybe you need to manage time better. Maybe you need to be better at achieving goals or avoiding conflict, resolving conflict. There's all kinds of trainings on Habitly.com. Soft skills drive your hard skills. They drive your career. They also drive your relationships personally. Check it out. Habitly.com, 7 days free. You can't go wrong. Today's episode is with Brendan Dell. He is a positioning and messaging expert to a lot of technology brands, and he has a course, the $1 billion pitch. He has a podcast, $1 billion tech. He's out there communicating. Let's see what he has to say. Let's dive in. Brendan, welcome to the show. I appreciate you joining us. You are a communications expert, and kind of uniquely, you've got the $1 billion pitch. That's quite a statement. And then the 12 immutable laws of high impact messaging. But you also have other business experience. I'm not sure where you want to start. Where would you like to go?
Sure. Well, I can. I'll give you the 1 minute history, I guess, of my professional life, if that's interesting to folks. And then we can take it from there. Is that a good place to start?
It's up to you. Go ahead.
All right. Well, so I work helping early stage founders scale beyond the founder-led sale. And this all started, I actually started in real estate down in Los Angeles. And the job then was, as a young person at that time, was to go get business for this team of tenant rep brokers on the west side of LA. And what they did was told me to go cold calling. So I went walking around the west side of Los Angeles, up and down office buildings, trying to find clients for these folks. I got thrown out of office buildings all day by the security guards there. It was very ineffective, very demoralizing, and was not succeeding in getting business for these folks. So after like a year of doing this, I came to this, like, there's got to be a better way moment. And it was at that time that I stumbled on this book about copywriting and positioning. And so I started digesting all this material. I developed a couple of direct mail pieces to try to get clients for this company. One was like a FedEx direct mail, and the other was it looked handwritten. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that I sent this out and ended up getting, like, I can't remember the number now, but it was some egregiously large amount of business for this team, $40 or $50 million worth of business, of which I earned, a very small amount of the money. So, no overstating.
You got a $5 Starbucks card.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If I was lucky, I got a nice pat on the head from them for my efforts. But that started my path into technology, because one of the CEOs of those companies was like, okay, this was pretty cool how you did this. Could you help me do something similar? And that led me into technology and led me into helping founders grow their businesses.
So when you talk about helping founders grow their businesses, what does that look like? What are you helping them do that they can't do on their own?
So most companies, or many companies, hit this plateau where they get some product market fit. If you're in a service-based business, you got some people who think they want the thing that you sell. Or if you're in a technology, like most of the people I work with, if you're in a technology business, you've got this product. But what you are the linchpin of that thing, right? You're the one who is doing the sales, you're doing the networking, and you hit this plateau where no one else is effectively communicating the value, right? Like a very common use case or example in B2B technology is, you come out of a functional area, you come out of finance, and you developed a tool for finance professionals. Well, if you don't understand accounting and you don't understand FP&A and you don't understand all those things, it's hard to sell that, right? Without having all that background. So you end up becoming the bottleneck to scale. And so how do you put the systems in place to attract the right kinds of customers, to create the right kind of demand, and then to scale you on a sales team effectively? And your answers are basically, you either have to experiment your way out of it, or you have to try and hire your way out of it. Both are which are have their own ups and downs and sort of pitfalls.
So, but can you give me an example of what that looks like? So what you've kind of done is present the problem but I'm not hearing the solution. So here I am. I'm doing all the sales, and I keep doing all the sales. And maybe it's been a year, maybe it's been 10 or 20 years.
Sure.
Yeah. How do I get out of it?
So there's the place that you begin is with foundations. Most early stage companies don't have a lot of the foundations in place that they need to build a sales and marketing engine. So the first of this is positioning, being able to answer the question, who am I for? How am I different? And then who am I for? How do I help? Like, what's the problem I solve? And how am I uniquely qualified to do so? And without the clarity of answer to that question, you can't develop segmentation. You can't build outbound campaigns or inbound campaigns. You can't scale a sales team and so forth. So answering that question is job one.
So give me an example of what that's looked like with a company who's gone through this.
Sure. So a company I'm working with right now is a company called Sudozi, and this is exactly the use case I just talked about. So the founder came out of finance, and she was the former CFO at Uber. And so she had this notion that growth stage teams at technology companies, they're lacking tooling to help them collaborate across the organization, that there's very siloed tools in place. So she developed this hypothesis around a tool that would have vendor management within it. It would have financial planning and analysis within it. You have kind of a number of different tools. And what she started to do was what most founders do. She went out and started networking. She thought there was a bunch of use cases for the tool, right? She thought maybe I could sell to legal, to operations, to finance. And she started networking, meeting with VCs, and she started spreading herself really thin. And what this resulted in is kind of a fuzzy product roadmap and no traction it was sort of fuzzy traction, fuzzy product roadmap and nebulous traction. And so what we did is, through a series of experiments, we helped her tranche down by answering the question, first of all, what is this tool? And the question was, it's an FP&A tool. We helped her get clarity around who are you going to target, which became finance professionals. And we do this series of experiments. And then how are you going to message those people? And so she went from this place of she's sort of running around trying to meet with all these people, whereas today she has somewhere between 5 and 8 meetings a day coming in through inbound systems with director of finance or higher at growth stage software companies. So that's the kind of outcome that you want to see.
Yeah, it sounds like it's much more focused on, who actually benefits from the product. So then she narrowed, those conversations. And then how do you get this? How does this tie with your either $1 billion pitch or the 12 immutable laws that you developed?
So all of this is parts of the framework, right? Or parts of the whole system. So with clarity of who you're going to speak with, your ideal customer profile, you then have to understand how are you going to, what are you going to say to them? And that's the framework for the $1 billion pitch. And what we did in that is break down, if you look at $1 billion software companies, they use predictable elements in all of their pitches. And so breaking down how to identify, those elements and how to tell a story that is going to move a buyer from, I'm not sure if this matters to me, to I need this thing right now. Messaging is another example of it. Messaging, right? Where you have to aggregate attention. You have to get people to lean in on what you're doing. And messaging is how you do that.
But once again, so give me an example of, like, you have this $1 billion pitch course. So what is the objective of that? Is that just for people who are looking for money, or is it used by people who are looking to grow their business?
So everyone has to communicate a vision of the world, right? That a vision of change for their prospect. We all have enough solutions, enough stuff. And so you have to communicate in some way that you have a prospect who's in this place of unhappy, right? And you're communicating that you can bring them to some kind of happier state. And leaders need to be able to succinctly explain whether they're trying to raise money, whether they're trying to convert a prospect, whether they're trying to communicate why talent should join their organization. They need to be able to communicate that story in a succinct and a compelling way about why this company is doing something meaningful that's going to help people. And that is what that narrative does. It aligns a company around so that all their functional areas are telling the same story and a story of a better future for a specific kind of person.
Okay, it makes sense, but walk me through it like a scenario with a different client that you've worked with on where they were and then kind of the steps you took that helped them get to where you wanted them to be.
Sure. So I think, to break down a full pitch is a complex idea, but I can give you some frameworks and ways of thinking about this. So a really common way that people pitch their business, okay, is to say, hey, my name's Brendan. I've been in marketing and advertising for 20 years. I've worked with the following companies, and I'm the best in advertising, right? They start with a lot of me statements. And so what an effective pitch is going to do is it's not going to focus on me statements. It's going to focus on how is the world changing? How does the person you're speaking with need to change their behavior in order to be successful in this new world, with this new game? And then how is your solution uniquely qualified to reach that future? So there's a company called Zuora, which was a subscription management platform, right? And one way they could have positioned their business is said, hey, we help drive more than 1 billion subscriptions for companies across the globe, right? But instead what they said was, we've now entered the subscription economy. There's been this massive shift in the way consumers want to do business, right? They now want subscriptions, not just transactions. And if you want to be successful in surviving in this new world, you need to provide a subscription experience. They provide examples of how companies like GE and I'm trying to think of who else is in their deck now, but basically how people pivoted from these product transactional ways of doing business to subscriptions, the outcomes of that, and how their tool can help you as an enterprise make this pivot and be successful.
Okay. And have you worked with leaders on how they kind of use your system for better engaging people who work for them?
So if you think about what a person joins a business, like what makes an engaged employee? It's someone who feels like their job is meaningful, who has clarity around how what they're doing maps to what the organization is doing, and feels like that they're helping to make the world a better place in some kind of way, right? In addition to, obviously, are they paid fairly and things like this. And so using this exact same mechanism, right? Using this narrative, you can help to align an organization around, this is the future we're creating. This is the result and the better world we're building for people. And then you, as individual parts of this team, here's how all that ladders up, right? Like, here's why this feature you're shipping matters, engineering, or here's why this customer service, change we're making matters, customer service or whatever the function.
Interesting. But let me go back to products. So what you're doing is you're saying that basically I'm going to learn what my customers want, and then I'm going to speak to that instead of speaking about myself or my company. Correct?
So the most effective framework I've found to start to diagnose how to start with, like how to speak to your market, is a framework which is not mine. It is I don't know who came up with it, but it's called Jobs to be Done. And it's essentially saying that any product or service we buy is accomplishing a job to be done. And so you can take anybody, and that could be, if I work in sales, right, I need to make cold calls. I need to, right? Like, so what are all the jobs in my life? And you can do the same thing for consumers. So looking at who is this person, what are their jobs to be done? And then where are the big, acute pains around those jobs? That gives you a frame to start to say, okay, this is the anchor for my story. This is how I can, start to anchor these people in a problem, rather than talking about me, who I am, and why I'm so great.
Okay. That makes sense to me. And so when do I choose to evolve that, update that, edit that? What are the triggers for changes in the way that I'm communicating that information?
Is your business growing at the rate that you'd like it to? Are you getting a lot of price, pressure from buyers saying, oh, well, you seem like another one of those, and things like this should cost that, and it seems like you're a little too expensive? Are you getting kind of confused looks when you talk to prospects and they don't have clarity around exactly what or why they should be buying your thing? Do you get a lot of people saying, oh, that's interesting. Maybe next quarter, next year, call me back, right? Those are all signs that what you're doing has not been positioned as a must-have, right? And doesn't have that resonance.
How do you really get that resonance? How do you really get? I mean, you've got a cool thing, but nobody's buying, or not as many people are buying as what you want. So I don't know whether you've worked with anybody in that situation, but it's how do you basically have the same product, but you're going to bring it out some different way that convinces people to buy. You mentioned some things at a high level, but what exactly is typically the trigger there that changes things? Because here you've got something that's dead in the water, or stale at least, but you've got to spark interest.
Yeah. So it comes back to clarity of buyer, understanding of problem, and then promise of transformation. I mean, if you think about this, right? Like if you think about it in terms of starting with the foundations of, let's take something simple from consumer life. If you sell hot dogs, right, and you stand in front of a 5-star restaurant downtown, right? Now your buyer is somebody who has eaten really good food. I don't care how good of a hot dog salesman you are, not selling hot dogs. But if you go and take that same hot dog cart and you stand out in front of a stadium, right, that's just letting out, now you have people who have a job that needs to be done. They're hungry. You don't need to be that good of a hot dog salesman, right? Because you found people with the pain. So a lot of people, and this my podcast is called $1 Billion Tech, and I had a gentleman on there by the name of Tony Jamu, who's the founder of Oyster HR, which is a unicorn, and I always use this phrase. He said, too many people have solutions looking for problems. It's my job as the CEO to focus on the problem and then increment the solution. And so what's the problem you're solving and for who? And then from there, you can make a promise of transformation, right? We transform customers into subscribers. That's what I said, right? There's clarity of benefit. There's clarity of differentiation, all these things in that very succinct and clear statement. But most companies just say we paint houses, right? There's no transformation implied there.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old story when you say that of I think it dates back hundreds of years when they were building a new cathedral, and they asked one guy what he does. He said, I'm just a stonemason. And they asked another guy who was working, and he said, oh, I'm building this great, glorious cathedral to glorify God type of thing, or whatever he said. But, it was obvious he knew what he was doing versus the other guy just had a job, versus the career. But so when somebody has to figure this out, that they're in front of the restaurant instead of in front of the stadium, how do they typically do that? Are they working with a third party? Are they going off and sitting on a mountaintop and contemplating, what they're missing? What's the process there to wake up?
Yeah. Sitting alone on mountaintops is never like the best solution to business problems, isn't it? It's like good for spiritual growth, maybe. So what are they doing? They're speaking, first of all, they're speaking with customers. They're having a hypothesis around. So here's an example of someone else we're working with right now. They have a product. Without going into the weeds of it, they might sell it to sales. They might sell it to customer success within an organization, right? So there's 2 different buyers they might sell this thing to. Now you start with what's the job to be done for each? How do you uniquely help, and what's the transformation? Now we're going to drive some inbound. You're going to set up some kind of a market. Like every business needs to have a reliable source of leads coming in. Otherwise, you have a broken. If you think of a system as a business as a system, you cannot have a system functioning without net new opportunities coming into that system, right? In terms of a business incrementing revenue. So how are we going to then take those 2 segments, create some advertising or whatever the choices we make, and start to have those conversations? And from those conversations and delivering the message, we're going to find out who has the bigger pain, right? And then we're going to focus, make the tough decision. We're going to focus 100% for a time on that place that's really giving them the outcome, and be willing to let some of these smaller opportunities go.
And you're also, aren't you, in part of that process, you're going to find out where you're making mistakes with your messaging?
Yeah, 100%. This is very much an iterative process that works based on go. It doesn't work based on pontificating or wondering or hoping and discussion internally is always useful, but it does not it's not sufficient to get the result, to get the learning you need to come to the conclusion.
And what does that testing typically look like? How is that done?
So I would think if you're talking about in like a lead generation scenario, which is where I focus my time, so is where I'm more qualified to have an opinion. The testing is going to be, first of all, I'm trying to think of how deep in the weeds to go with you here in terms of setting all this up.
Go deep. Yeah. Tell us the story. Give us the detail. Whatever.
Well, okay. Let's look at Sudozi for a second in terms of how we're verifying that message, right? So the way that I would first start is by saying, where do I think, based, the audience that I have, where do I think I can begin to aggregate their attention? Meaning, where are they already looking for a source of entertainment or education or whatever the case may be? So for them, it's LinkedIn as an obvious choice, right? You can target there. There's some, they're going there for professional education and so forth. The next thing you're going to be doing is setting up your advertising platforms in an effective way, which is you're going to need to build campaigns based on how buyers buy. So that's awareness. Do they know who you are and what you do? Consideration. Do they think they're the right choice for you? And then decision, how you can convert that interest into a conversation. From those conversations, you're going to deliver the message and you're going to see over a quarter or 2 quarters, whatever your sales cycle is, am I incrementing revenue in a way that I think it, but whatever those metrics are for you, we can share benchmarks, but that is at a basic level how you're going to test something like this. And now you can think about building a system that moves you past founder-led sale versus how do I hustle, right? Like, how do I just go network, meet a few more people, ask for a few more referrals, right? How do I build a thing that's going to produce on a cadence?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So, Brendan, if people want to learn more about you, what you do, where do they go?
So they can tune into $1 Billion Tech, which they can find on iTunes, YouTube, all the good stuff. They can go to brendandell.com. And that's probably the best places. LinkedIn.
Okay, super. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate your input. Sounds like some great tips for our audience.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you liked the episode with Brendan, please subscribe, leave us a comment or a rating. Love to hear from you. And please don't forget our sponsor, Habitly.com, where you can learn to have the habits that will break down barriers for you. You can become the best version of you. And wouldn't that be a great thing? Habitly.com. And again, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned. We have more great guests coming. Bye for now.